Last episode that we spoke, I talked to you about how Lee and I came to Honduras, how Heart of Christ began, and how our Victims Project began with us reconstructing the post office. And it was a really interesting thing how God had told us that our entire ministry began with rebuilding that police post that had collapsed. That's the craziest thing because it didn't make any sense whatsoever, and all it required was a bit of obedience. Also, when God first told us in 2004 to sell everything, get rid of everything, and move to Honduras without telling us what it is that we were going to be doing, it was interesting because it made it difficult for us to tell people exactly what it was that we were going to be doing. But as time progressed and we were asked to write the victims program, and then we presented it, and the colonel then announced, he didn't ask, he announced that I was now chief of special crimes for what we thought at the time was the village of Talunga, or maybe the county of Talunga, in which our village is in. And in reality, it was the entire state of Francisco Morazan outside of Tegucigalpa. And so in February of 2005, they had a ceremony they call inauguration, and generals came from the police in Tegucigalpa. I'd never met a colonel, never mind meeting a general. And they placed us in this office to attend women, children, elderly, disabled, who were victims of violence, to bring services to them. And the program that I constructed was a program that attended the various difficulties that were here in Honduras. One was the lack of resources that the authorities had. We provided cameras and computers and skill and counseling vehicle, all of that, staff in the office to help attend victims and advocate for victims. Then there was the lack of training, where most of the police officers didn't know what to do in these specific cases, and things like that. And so one of the things that we did, also the victims needed help with transportation and medical attention and food and clothing and housing, refuges, and all of that. And a lot of this developed over time, as we realized, but the main basic function of the office was to have a specialized group of people that were available to attend these victims of special crimes, which would be domestic violence and family violence, child abuse, elderly abuse, violation of human rights, kidnapping, women and children who were victims of kidnapping or murder, rape, attempted rape, child prostitution, sex trafficking, all of these crimes that women, children, elderly, and disabled are victims of, mostly women and children. And throughout this work that we were doing, we were training police officers, we were training investigators, we were training prosecutors and judges. I've been certified to train in the laws and procedures. But we were also focusing on the public to train parents and children. We'd go into the schools, hold events in the schools. We would hold events with leaders in different communities. And as I said in the beginning, we thought it was just Talunga, or the county of Talunga, not just the city of Talunga. But the reality was that it was for the entire state outside of Tegucigalpa. And so we began going to each of the different counties, to Cedros and San Ignacio and El Porvenir, Morales, Guaymaca, Orica, Cantaranas, Villa de San Francisco. There's another one, Vallecillo, that's way out in the boondocks. There's nothing out there. And we would train leaders. We would hold events and train leaders. We would hold events and we would train parents. We would go into the schools and we would teach the children on how to strengthen the family, how to create a culture of peace, how to recognize if somebody was a victim of violence, and what to do and what our responsibilities are in rescuing people who are victims of violence, and how to do that. And then with the authorities, it was teaching them what their obligations were, what the law was, what the procedures are, how to take care of victims. And so all of that was working together. When victims would come, we would help them, as I said, with food and with medicine, with clothes, with counseling, with love. And it's interesting how you can share the Word of God in all of this. The Lord talks a lot about justice in the Bible, and we can rescue a victim, a woman or a child, and tell them, that God sent us to rescue them, that Jesus sent us to rescue them. When we first began this ministry, I began to have sponsors who would say to me, well, how is you putting on a pistol and a vest and going out with a priest? How is that missionary work? That missionaries, they preach, they have clinics, they have schools, they have children's homes, all of these other things. And it was very difficult for me to explain this to people in the beginning days. But one of the things I do, and if you'll do this right now as I'm talking to you, close your eyes. Close your eyes. Just sit here and listen to my voice. Close your eyes. Imagine that you are a 6 or a 7-year-old, 8-year-old, 9-year-old, maybe younger, maybe older. And at night you hear footsteps coming down the hall. And then you hear the door open and the footsteps come near your bed. And you know in this moment that your father or your brother or your uncle or cousin or grandfather or stepfather or some other person in your family who does this all the time is going to start doing things to you. They're going to climb into your bed and start doing things to you. Now imagine that you're a 12-year-old girl and you're born in Honduras or another third world country, or even in the United States, but mostly this happens in third world countries. And you're 12 years old and your father has abandoned your family and your mother has 4, 5, 6 children. And your mother takes you out of school because she has to go into the fields to work in order to feed you, because your absent father and your siblings' absent father or fathers, if there's more than one, is not helping to support you or them. And so therefore, the taking care of all of the children in the house, washing the clothes by hand, hauling the water, hauling the wood, cleaning the house, the cooking, everything falls onto your shoulders while your mother is gone to the fields all day long. And when she comes home, she's exhausted and nothing you ever do is right. She screams at you and yells at you, calls you names, hits you. Cooking's not good enough. House isn't cleaned up good enough. You're not worth anything. And she beats you. And one day while she's gone at work, this 30-year-old, 40-year-old man comes by. And he starts to tell you how pretty you are, and how you're his star, and how he's your love of his life. And he promises you that he's going to take you somewhere and you're going to have a life together and you'll be the master of the house. You won't have to take care of all these kids and suffer all this abuse. And so one of the days that your mom goes to work, you pack your things into a plastic bag and you leave with him. But then when you get to be with him, you find out that he won't let you leave the house. He won't let you have any friends. He beats you. He forces you to have sex and do things you don't want to do. And then eventually comes the day that you find out you're pregnant. And what does he do? Instead of being the loving husband and father that he promised that he would be, here you are, 13 years old, and you're pregnant, and he takes you back to your mother's house and drops you off. Keep your eyes closed. So maybe you're 15 years old or 16 years old, and your father's out of work or he's working the fields and there's not enough money, and your grandparents are ill, and the roof on the house is leaking or falling apart, and you guys don't have enough clothes. It's all hand-me-downs, and maybe you're lucky you eat chicken once a week, if you're lucky. You eat eggs a couple times a week because you have a couple chickens, but most of the time you're just eating beans and rice and tortillas. And life is hard. It's really, really hard. And then someone comes to your village and they promise you a job somewhere else, that you can go and you can make money and you can send it back and you can be the savior of your family. Maybe you can get the medical care your grandparents need. You can fix the roof. Your brothers and sisters and your family, they can have more chickens and eat chicken. and maybe get some vegetables and some cheese and some fruits to eat. And so everyone's excited. Your mom's excited, your dad's excited, your grandparents are excited. You know, they spend the last of their money for this big going away meal, and you meet these people the day they come to pick you up, and then you go to work, and it's not what they said it was going to be. Basically, you're now a slave. You're a prisoner. And you're being forced to sleep with men 10, 12, 15 times a day. You're beaten if you don't do it. They tell you if you try to run away and you don't cooperate, they show you a picture of your little sister and they say, we're going to kill her. And there's no hope. You're stuck. You're forced in this situation where they're forcing drugs and alcohol in you and forcing you to have sex with men, do things that you could never imagine doing. And of course, you can't go back home, because if you go back home and they find out what you're actually doing, that you're not working in a restaurant or a hotel, or sometimes they even offer education and say, oh, you're going to take you and send you off to school. What will people think? What will your family think? They'll be so disappointed. And money isn't going home to your family at all. But there's nothing you can do, because if you try to escape, they know where you live. They have a recent picture of your little sister. They're informing you, oh, that your grandmother was in the hospital last week, because they know where you live, and they know where your family is, and there's no way out. Or maybe you're the wife of somebody who beats you every day. He comes home drunk, and he rapes you. He sleeps with other women. He gives you infections all the time. And there's nothing you can do. He says your mom doesn't love you anymore. He's the only one that loves you. Nobody could love you. You're stupid. You're fat. You're ugly. You know, you can't cook food right. You know, you talk too much or something like that. And he just beats you. He pulls your hair. He throws you against the wall. And you can't tell anybody, because he tells you that if you leave him, he's going to kill you. So maybe he even holds a gun to your head, or swings a machete at you, or holds a knife to your throat. And there's no way out. And there's no way to end the nightmare of being the little girl who's raped every night. There's no way to end the nightmare of being the 12-year-old, 13-year-old pregnant in a situation without education, without hope, without help. The nightmare continues that there's no escape from being a victim of sex trafficking or being a victim of domestic violence. There's no hope. There's no help. And if Jesus doesn't show up in that moment, if Jesus doesn't send somebody into the darkness, my husband and I, we joke when we call our ministry the dark side of ministry, because you wouldn't believe the things that we have to deal with and the things that we have to see. If Jesus doesn't come into the darkness in that moment, sorry, I'm really emotional about this, because you have no idea. You have no idea of the suffering. Well, some of this may be going on around you in the United States or wherever it is that you're reading, but in third world countries, there's no hope. There's no help. There's no rescue. This is it. This is all there is. And if Jesus doesn't show up in that moment and bring rescue for you, and bring care for you, and bring restoration, the possibility of a life without being raped and beaten and abused and enslaved, if Jesus doesn't show up in this moment, what hope? What hope do you have? Sorry, I get emotional, because the things that I have seen, I cannot unsee. The things that I know, I can't unknow. And our ministry is called Heart of Christ, because it's Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane, the night that he was arrested, when he was feeling the oppression and the suffering of the world, so much so that he sweat blood, and he asked the Father, take this cup from me. But as God, in knowing what his purpose and what his mission was, he got up, knowing full well what he would suffer, and he walked to that cross. That is the heart of Christ, the heart that can see and can feel the suffering of the world, and knows the sacrifice, the danger, and the suffering, to do something about it. Not just talk about it, not just say, oh yeah, there's people, and then this foreign country. Oh, yeah, there's women's surveillance. Oh, well, maybe they deserve what they got, or they were stupid. They shouldn't have believed that. No. It's knowing the tricks and the deceit that is done and the violence that is done against these women and children and elderly victims and disabled victims. And how these people have no hope in these third world countries who don't have the money for programs, who don't have the ability to have resources and patrullas and services for victims. They don't exist. They don't exist. In the States, you can call the police, and if they're not in your house in 2 minutes, you can file a complaint, and 5 police cars are at your house. 30 seconds, 1 minute, 2 minutes. You call the police here, they may never come. Most postas, police posts, don't even have a telephone. Most of them don't have a truck, a police patrulla, or a motorcycle. Most of the officers don't know what the procedures are. I know that sounds unbelievable, but it's the truth. There's no hope. There's no help. There's no psychologists to help. There's no social workers to help. There's no refuges for victims of violence. There's nothing. Nothing for victims of violence. And so we began this work in 2006, February 20th, 2006, which happens to be International Day of Social Justice, believe it or not. We began the work, and it's been a great success. And we'll talk more about that in our next episode.